on that day, the world was changed forever. Welcome to the world of ruin. I'm Drew Kreisman.
And I am Ira Kreisman.
And on this episode, we continue our conversation on the plot, themes, characters, and, dare I say, tragedies of Final Fantasy VI. This may be a little bit of an emotional episode. When last we left our heroes, the world was destroyed by a mad clown with godlike powers. That's what happened.
Yep.
They were, most of them, other than Shadow, who was still trying to prevent the inevitable here, on the airship known as the Blackjack that was split right down the middle, scattering the party who knows where, with Celes falling right through the middle. And the last we saw, the oceans were turning reddish purple, the continents were splitting apart, and we get a fade to black. We get the sentence that I read up top, and then we open with this sort of hovering camera just showing all of the destruction before it settles over an island, the little beach. We see a bird, presumably a pigeon or a pigeon-like bird on the beach, which is actually an interesting bit of symbolism that will play a role, and it's a good bit of foreshadowing here for everything that's about to come as well. That the first thing we see once we get off of the kind of overworld, over-the-shoulder camera and back onto our straight-down view that we have for most of the game, we see the bird, then we pan up. There's a very small cabin, and inside of that cabin, we see Celes lying in bed, being tended to by Dr. Sid.
Yeah.
I assume he's a doctor.
I mean, presumably he had to study medicine in school in order to be able to, experiment on magical creatures. I think that's probably a prerequisite.
I assume.
Yeah. This broken down house on this little island. There's no music. It's just the sound of the sea and the wind, I'm pretty sure. It's very desolate. Like you said, we get that sort of panning over the world, the mist-colored sky, the mist-colored sea. And Sid comes in and he's checking on her, and then he goes to work at this desk, presumably writing some kind of a note or taking notes or drawing up plans. He is, after all, a Sid. And Celes begins to stir, and she finally wakes up. And Sid tells her that she's been sleeping for a year. A year.
Yeah, this might be our first real big jump forward in time in a Final Fantasy, at least a non-magical one. If we've done time travel-y type things or going into
Chrono
vortexes
Trigger
to fight gods and stuff. Yeah. Chrono Trigger's all about traveling through time. But yeah, this is just our story picking up a year later from where we left off. And I don't think a Final Fantasy game has used that particular rhetorical device before.
No,
it would be used again.
Right.
But
Certainly not one that I remember. It's not like we've talked about all the other Final Fantasies before this one.
Right. Surely we'd remember something. Yeah.
In any case, he explains that she's been asleep for a year. I would think that would suggest that she's been in some kind of a coma. And Sid has been watching over her this whole time. And Celes is obviously grateful. And he says, I am about out of energy. He explains that there were others, but we're the only two left. Celes remembers her friends and asks, if they're here. Do you know where Locke is? She calls out Locke by name specifically. Sid, this is so exhausting, I guess, in a way. He says he doesn't know. He says maybe we're the only ones left. He says the world is dying, and the few others who were here passed away of boredom and despair. And oppressive, maybe?
Yeah, I don't think you can pass away from boredom, first of all.
Okay, fair enough.
There are a few bits of clunky writing in here, or clunky translating maybe. We've given Ted Woolsey props as he deserves them, and will again in this episode, actually, because there's some great writing. But when he says he's out of energy, that I think could have very easily should have been I'm just exhausted from the year of being alone and just taking care of you, and I haven't really had much time to take care of myself. This could have been better written. The point still comes across.
It feels a little game mechanic-y. I'm out of energy.
Yeah, right. I'm low on hit
Something
points
Mega
now.
Man might say.
Right. As well as, that people died of boredom and despair. But this is also a Super Nintendo game where you have to be careful about how dramatic some of these things can be. We've talked about, I think in the past, the difference between words like destroy and kill. That's like a whole thing in Star Wars. Nobody ever kills, they destroy.
Power Rangers, too, when I was a kid. I noticed that. And
so here, I think in a modern translation, you would have to rightfully say that whoever was left died of starvation and illness and, things that actually kill people when they're stranded on a desert island.
I think,
or wounds from the destruction of the planet.
Right. Absolutely. But I think people absolutely do die of despair.
True. And maybe that's a word that captures all of what I'm saying there in one. Maybe that's kind of what they're getting at. So fair enough. I mean, not of, I guess maybe of the things that also cause despair. Maybe I'm being a little bit pedantic here. Wouldn't be the first time. But yeah, I think it could be cleaned up, or at the very least, I think the writing could be made better.
Sure.
And there are even some weird plot contrivances for what's about to come next that, like, I can get past because, as I've talked about, I don't care about those things as much. And the emotion of everything that happens here on the island is so powerful that how exactly it's explained is so much less important.
Right. Because Sid has been taking care of Celes, among other things, for the past year, Celes decides that she can take care of him now. Sid says to Celes that you're the closest thing I have to family. We could live out our lives here, and Celes is kind of okay with that. She says maybe I could even call you Granddad, which is cute.
Yeah, they very quickly develop, and again, I think you could drag this out on our HBO special when this is one episode, probably just of them on the island. I think you could honestly do that and drag out the emotion, have her dealing with some of the consequences of her role in it. Because while I think it's implied, she never says out loud as she's dealing with her grief, I wish I had never done some of the things that I did. I think you could get a lot of that in here and then drive home this relationship of them becoming very, very close and being a grandpa-granddaughter-like relationship. And it has that switch where one takes care of the other, and then there comes a time when the younger needs to take care of the older.
Right.
And, yeah, it's really powerful stuff, and it's probably a part of the reason why, despite every horrible thing he's done, you and I still feel this emotional connection to Sid.
Right. I was re-listening to our episode about the top 10 Sids, and because I was curious, what did I say? I can't remember quite what I said about why I like this Sid so much, because I ranked him fairly highly. And it's as much because of him being in Final Fantasy VI and him trying to come to terms with what he's done. I wonder, though, if I ranked him too highly because of my nostalgia for this game. And we talked about that during that episode. But I wonder, like, he did horrible things. And we talked about, are we going to forgive him? Is he going to forgive himself? Do I really want to rank him that highly on my list? I feel much more conflicted about all that now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, but I also think, I ranked one of the Sids who's an out-and-out villain very high on my list. So if it's about whether or not the guy is an interesting character and not just somebody who you think is a great hero, I think this Sid is an extremely interesting character because of all of the things that you mentioned. And I think that it's actually perfectly reasonable to accept this one sort of big redemption scene here, that he gives all of the last of himself to save Celes, which is really step one of restoring balance to the world and to the warriors of light, and that they develop this relationship, that it has this impact on her, and that they're two people who are grasping for something in a world that feels completely lost, is, I think, really powerful stuff. And while when I was a kid, I think I was a bit too young to fully experience the emotion of all of this. Just watching this recently really choked me up quite a bit because you do get a sense of two people who are extremely flawed, both of whom are, to some degree, even to a large degree, responsible for the state that the world is in, and they can choose to do one of two things: give up and die, or try to do something in the face of enormous odds to try to make it right. And both of them, in whatever way they can, choose to try to make it right. And isn't that the heart of what Final Fantasy is about?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. That and fishing minigames.
The first one.
Isn't it? Yeah. Though I have to say my first fishing minigame was Breath of Fire.
I was going to say the same thing, yeah.
What else? I mean, Final Fantasy 15 has a fishing minigame.
Sure.
14, Pokemon.
Almost everything now has a fishing game.
Yeah, it's become a thing.
Yeah.
Is that because Japanese role-playing games are made in Japan and Japan's an island or a set of islands?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I have wondered that also about trains. It seems like in a lot of Japanese pop culture, not that I have my thumb on the pulse of Japanese pop culture, but it seems like there are a lot of trains and there's a lot of fishing and like a lot of beach parties. Anyway, the point here is that Cid is ill and Celes is catching him fish and presumably cooking them also, but there's no cooking minigame here. And the goal is to catch the fast-moving fish because they're the yummy fish, and like there's a whole point system that's behind the scenes that you don't see. And if you catch enough and feed him enough, he will eventually say, "I feel much better," and you can save him. And he explains that there's a project that kept him going, and it's down below, and go have a look. That said,
yeah, that's one way the story can go, but in a world where we don't have a multiple choice again in our HBO retelling, our Netflix special, that's not how the story goes.
Well, I was going to ask you, in our hypothetical remake, would you choose, like presumably we would have this whole thing where Celes is trying to save him and like maybe things are feeling a little bit better and maybe we can make this work on this island. I'll just live out a simple, peaceful life here. Do we have her save Cid or not?
In no way. Because the scene that follows, and again, this is back to your, the difference between appreciating something as a well-written piece of literature and like rooting for something to happen in a fictitious story. I don't like that. Okay, well, I guess we'll describe it now. That if you fail to save Cid and he dies in bed, Celes, in a fit of emotion, sprints to the top of a mountain, sees a dead bird there,
more bird symbolism.
An original symbol of hope, and it's dead there. And Cid is gone, and she kind of does everyone's gone, Locke is gone, the world, and now I'm on this island alone.
Right.
And she throws herself off the top of the cliff.
Yeah. It's kind of...
And the sky goes black. It's very surreal.
It feels to me like it parallels the opera scene when she, as Maria, tosses the flowers off the balcony. Not really giving up hope, but like, I've lost this battle. And this feels like a strong parallel to that scene.
Yeah, except instead of throwing the roses, she throws herself.
Right. If Maria was metaphorically giving up herself, here Celes is literally doing so. And I agree, it's a much more powerful scene than Cid saying, "Hey, go down those stairs and find that raft I built for you."
Right. And also because again, we'd have to go through every detail, and that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do here, but in order, I think this is the only suicide attempt of any major character in a Final Fantasy game. And there might be others, especially in some of the ones we haven't played as much, but it certainly shocking. And you could actually argue that it's done ambiguously enough that maybe it isn't even a suicide attempt. That like she throws herself into the water, and there's even a line about like taking a leap of faith that I think they put in there specifically. Like, so if you're playing it with your kids, you could try to say, "Oh no, she's just really upset, and so she jumped into the water." But you know,
I thought that was meant to be a metaphor, like a.
Oh, it is
a euphemism. Yeah,
it is.
Okay, yeah.
But I think that's really smart and clever writing. So I was just giving him a hard time a minute ago. I do think that gives you a little bit of wiggle room, the way it's presented.
Yeah.
Certainly she doesn't give any sort of goodbye, cruel world, or write a note or do anything. She's just in an absolute fit of emotion and
despair.
Even the way like we have seen the sparkling light Terra turns into one when she flies off into the distance. It's kind of the same sparkles we talked about in Chrono Trigger when Marl disappears when she's erased from existence. Those sort of points of light.
Right.
And they're used as tears for Celes as she throws herself off the cliff. And it's just breathtaking.
But our hero survives this leap of faith and washes up on the beach where she's been living for, I don't know, weeks, months since she woke up. And she's woken by a bird. Again, with the birds. I wonder if, we've talked before about the Hope Baby as a trope. I think birds, especially in the world of Ruin, feel like a symbol of hope, like you were saying, that this is a trope. The bird of hope, perhaps. In Chrono Trigger, there was that plant of hope of sorts in the Ice Age. And in Wall-E, for that matter. But here, it sort of feels like there's that bird of hope. And actually, as I was redoing this scene recently for the podcast, I was reminded of another bird of hope in Final Fantasy.
Is it the one I'm thinking of?
Well, because the whole world is dead, except, life finds a way, as Jeff Goldblum tells us.
Right.
And so, yeah, seeing that bird after everything that's happened, after finally perhaps winning the day, yeah, the bird of hope is really cool.
Another thing that really got to me that I didn't remember as much about this as a kid being emotionally impacted by, but she starts to yell at the bird. She scolds the bird for waking her up, for nursing her back to health, which I'm not quite sure how that happened. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe she's yelling at Sid when she says that. She's angry to have been woken up and is almost defiant. Like, how dare you? And it parallels to me Tom Hanks in Castaway when he gets mad at Wilson.
You're right. Yeah.
And it's just heartbreaking. Like, you're stranded on this island and this bird could be the only friend you've got, and you're just, you've lost it. Celes, you've lost it. But then she gets a glimpse of a piece of hope. Finally.
Yeah, the bird is wearing a bandana or is clutching a bandana. It has a bandana with it. And she wants to know where the bird got the bandana, as though there aren't just scraps of cloth lying all over the world. And probably this bandana isn't Locke's bandana, but it certainly puts her in mind of Locke's bandana. Probably it found a scrap of cloth somewhere and is making a nest, right?
Right. Yeah,
but
she demands answers from the bird at first. But once she...
Where did you get this? Is he alive? Like, again, shouting at the beach ball or the volleyball.
Right. And then it just flies off, but then she finally says, and probably because she has to, he's alive.
Right. Yeah.
Like you said, she made all that up. That wasn't his bandana.
Right.
I've heard people criticize this scene before, saying how convenient that the bird just happened to fly by with Locke's bandana. That ain't Locke's bandana.
No, almost certainly not. But she, it gives her that spurring on, that spark of whatever it is she needs to continue. And so she goes back inside and she finds a note left by Grandpa Sid. Presumably this is part of what he was working on. When you're trying to feed him, we forgot to mention he'll run to the bed real quick.
Yeah, he keeps being out of bed, and you're like, hey, old man, get back in bed.
trying to save your life.
Right.
But there's a note, and he says in the note, you need to leave. The others are waiting for you. Find the stairs. Down them lies your road to freedom. Love, Granddad.
Which is a really super nice and sweet note, but again, I've got some pragmatic plot
Sure.
issues with this. It is a little tough. You're like, why didn't you guys just take that raft on out of here and not get dead? Presumably, it's
Right.
only just recently been finished. Why didn't he tell her he was building a raft? You could make an issue of this. I choose not to.
I assume there's sort of that you don't want to get your hopes up. What if I don't finish?
Right.
What if it's not seaworthy? I'm not going to try to make her carry this sick old man with her across the sea.
Right. And that's,
I think,
in a retelling, it would be very easy to justify, and that's why I don't make an issue of it. Again, it's the difference between a plot hole and a loose end.
Sure. Yeah. And I have to assume this is one of the best built, most over-engineered rafts to ever have existed in the multiverse.
Yeah. Oh, top engineer of the Empire, you know.
Right. He never builds an airship. I mean, presumably he built some of those airships, the Air Force that the Empire uses.
No.
But he did build us a raft, which is, I don't know, that there's a fun dichotomy there. This engineer never builds us an airship,
Yeah.
but he does build us a raft.
Yeah.
So Celes, with nothing else to do, gets on the raft, and wherever the tides will take her. We do get a new overworld theme, which is at least as oppressive as the purple oceans and the orange sky, and all the plant life is dying on this world. Like, everything's sort of brownish. There's no green. Even some of the monsters, like if you go out and try to fight the monsters on the island with Sid, they slowly die whether or not you do anything to them.
Yeah. Yeah, everything is pretty messed up.
But eventually, Celes washes up on shore. We end up on the Imperial continent in the town of Albrook. Albrook is still around. There are some things you hear about here. We hear about, on that day, debris from all over the world was pulled to the center of the Imperial continent to create Kefka's tower right on top of the Imperial capital of Vector. We hear about these 8 dragons that have been released since the breaking of the world, and that they seal away some powerful entity known as the Crusader. We hear about Pumbaba and Doomgaze. And we hear about the Light of Judgment. That is, from atop his Tower of Madness, the god of nihilism will strike down anybody who even vaguely offends him. He's destroyed the town of Mobliz with it. We learn that the world's been remade, so like the Serpent Trench is now above ground. Certain things that have been sunken for years are above water, and certain things that have been above water are now under.
Yeah, and most of the towns, like you see when you go into Albrook, about half of the buildings have been completely destroyed. They've fallen apart. There's been no real attempt to repair them. Presumably that would incite Kefka's wrath to try to rebuild anything. And so, yeah, every city that you can, really towns, that you can visit in the world of ruin is full of broken and empty buildings.
So now that you've got Celes on the world map, there are only a few things that you absolutely have to do in order to proceed to the end of the game. For example, the next thing we're going to describe, you can skip entirely. The point at this point is to recollect our allies and take the fight to Kefka, but you don't have to collect them all. That said, I think we're going to go through and describe all the events of collecting all our characters before we move on to the end game here.
Don't have to collect them all.
Yes, well done. So in the town of Tsen, as soon as you enter, the Light of Judgment strikes it, suggesting that somebody here has irritated Kefka, and there's a house collapsing. Celes, being a hero, goes to try to help, and hey, we know this guy, this bear of a man who is holding this house up all by himself.
Yeah, that'd be a fun
it's-
scene to do in a retelling in some sort of modern. How is Sabin realistically holding up this building? We know he's super strong, but it could be done. I'm for it.
Sure. We could come up with something.
Yeah.
You got to take Celes inside. It's one of those timed missions. You got to run around this house and collect treasure and find the kid and get out in time, and then Sabin will move and the whole house collapses. Celes and Sabin, of course, are thrilled to see each other. Sabin says a thing. He says, "You think a minor thing like the end of the world would do me in?"
Yeah,
Nice.
I like this tonally because we've just been through an ordeal. Sid died, Celes tried to kill herself. This is all coming after all of the other wrath and destruction that we've seen. And Sabin brings a much-needed moment of levity and hope and positive attitude that you would hope to get from him. And it's different. The end of the world affected everybody. He's not the same guy he was. But yeah, I love that line. So I was giving the writers and or translators a hard time a minute ago. This, I think, is done perfectly. A minor thing like the end of the world. You think that'd do me in? Oh, it's so good.
Right. Yeah, I think it speaks to his character as a guy who's going to keep pushing no matter what. I do have to wonder what he's been doing for the last year. I kind of assume he's been wandering around the Imperial continent helping whomever he can.
Right.
Because that's the kind of guy he is, trying to bring some hope.
And that's what we find him doing, is holding up this building, and presumably
Right.
he's doing the little things. I assume he's been a very Batman-like-esque figure
Sure.
in these times.
In fact, I forgot to mention, back in Albrook, there's a man who says, "The spark in your eye, it matches that of a man who went north to Tsen." And I assume that's Sabin. Sabin's still got that spark.
Right. And that also lends credence to the Warriors of Light motif.
Nice, yeah.
That
Yeah.
they're somehow recognizable, these people.
There is another thing we can learn here, that there are some people who have devoted themselves to Kefka. They've created a cult of Kefka, and they have built themselves a tower in this valley that you can only get access to if you can fly. Or presumably there are some mountain passes. It's just not available to us as a game mechanic. So now with Sabin and Celes, we can make our way to the town of Mobliz. You walk along the Serpent Trench, that again is now above water. Again, this is something you don't have to do, but I think it's good to mention it now because I think it makes sense with the story.
Right.
You get to town. There's no town music. This is the town everyone has said has been totally destroyed by the light of judgment.
And specifically, you can hear about it before. They'll tell you here, but you can hear rumors before you even arrive that the adults in town are all dead.
Right.
From
Right.
from the light of judgment from Kefka, having protected their children.
Right. So there's like a house that's underwater. Everything's broken down. Once you enter town, immediately a couple of watchdogs bark at you, but they don't prevent you from going in. So I kind of got to wonder.
Yeah.
They're very good boys.
Maybe they
Very
know.
good doggos.
They know. Again, Warriors of Light.
So,
Can
right,
sense the
right.
sparkle.
A kid will come outside and shout and then run back inside. And, of course, you follow the kid and you go downstairs into a house, into a basement. And there's this sort of hidden room. And you go into these cave rooms. And here we see a whole bunch of kids. And one of them, in fact, comes up to you and says, "You're going to have to fight your way in here, mister."
Yeah. That's good.
But Tara's here. So, third party member, right on. Tara's here. She calls off the kids, so you don't have to fight them, which is probably for the best.
That's probably good. And Celes goes right into it. Hey, great to
Yeah.
see you. Let's go. It's time to get Kefka. We got to fight him back. Let's go.
And Tara just walks away. Talking to the kids here, they refer to Tara as Mama. They explain that, they are who is left. There are a couple of older kids here, Dwayne and Katerin. Like all the kids have the kid sprites and they have the adult-sized sprites, but I have to assume mid to late teens.
Yeah.
And that one of the kids says, "You're not going to take Tara away, are you?"
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And another
Yes, I am,
one
but-
says, "My mommy and daddy died." Like there's real
Yeah.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
So you get to Tara, and she explains that she can't fight any longer. That, we've already talked about the story. Everybody here died when Kefka turned his light on the town. There's only the kids left. And the moment she arrived, she felt needed, which is not really a thing I think she's felt. Like Bannon wanted her to fight for the returners, right? Like everybody was asking her to be a warrior. Nobody needed her like this, and this is new for her. And I distinctly remember in high school, a buddy of mine being really down on Tara for this scene. Like, her not wanting to fight, that she's, I'm not going to repeat any of the things that teenage boys say when they think somebody's not strong enough. But,
Sure.
They were saying mean things at her. I was like, I don't think I said the things at the time that I would say now, that this is, in fact, is very strong of her to not get back into the fight, but rather to take on the responsibility of protecting, caring for, teaching children.
Yeah, and children who are not biologically her own, but she has never been able to have a relationship with her biological parents. And
Right.
She has this line, too, about how in being here, she's feeling things she's never felt before. We talked a
Right.
lot in the World of Balance about her trying to find out what love is, and a lot of times I think that can be framed as romantic love, and especially when she's talking about it with General Leo, I think we all kind of lean in and go, ooh, oh. And,
Right.
that's good, too. But to have this sort of unconditional love of a child, and remember, she's been taking care of these kids for a year now, and to form that kind of found family. We talked about that as one of our major themes for this game. This is it. She's never had a place where she belonged before. Maybe for a short while with our group of returners or light warriors, but again, we're always trying to make her do stuff, broker a peace, and find a way and be the only hope that we have. And instead of being the hope for the entire world, she's just going to take care of these 25 kids who don't have parents anymore.
Right.
And there's something very powerful about that, especially in a world like this where who knows if anything can be done about Kefka, that maybe all we can do is take care of each other. And Celes was just a while ago ready to live out the rest of her life on an island with an old guy.
Right.
Hanging out.
Right.
So I think they also kind of understand at that point.
I should hope so. Like, I never get the impression that any of the characters here look down on Tara for making this decision.
Agreed.
Which I appreciate.
And it's even driven home a little bit when suddenly...
Right. One of the monsters, one of the kaiju perhaps,
Right.
freed by the breaking of the world, attacks this town. I don't know why. I'm going to say Pumbaba.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Funbaba.
Yeah.
Because it's got that PH, but whatever. Pumbaba attacks the town. It's sort of just a narrative device, but you might think that, Pumbaba's been rampaging across the continent in general.
Right.
But Tara runs out to defend the town and quickly loses. She can't. She really does not have what it takes to fight like this anymore.
Yeah, you do 0 damage in battle.
Right. So Celes and Sabin hero up. They go out there. They chase off Pumbaba, who drops the Fenrir Magicite for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And Tara is in bed. She says, I've lost my fighting edge. As you can see, I'm no help to you. Besides, these children need me.
Yeah.
And so our heroes move on.
I have to say that shocked me when I was a kid. Again, you think a video game, you go, you find she's been kind of the main character of the game up to this point. Like, all right, cool, we got Tara back. Now we're really ready to go. I didn't think she was going to say no, and that you were going to have to
Right.
leave without her. It's so good.
Right.
It's so strong.
So, on the other side of the Serpent Trench is the town of Nikke, or Nikie, whatever.
Nikia is always how I've pronounced it, but that almost sounds too much like
Okay,
yeah, IKEA. I don't know. Yeah.
sure. I'm sure somebody knows how to pronounce it. You will, as you're walking along the Serpent Trench, pass the mountainous valley in which the Fanatic's Tower rests, but you can't get there. And in this town, in the cafe, you find a bunch of thieves who are pretty overt about what their plans are. Apparently they escaped from Figaro, from the prisons of Figaro, and they plan on, heading back. A couple other things you can, or one other thing you can pick up here is that there are some people who, after the end of the world, woke up alone in Doma Castle, and whenever they slept there, demons came for them. You'll find that from a couple different people throughout the world. But the thieves explain that they intend to go to Figaro Castle, that they escaped through some caves created by sandworms, and that they have a new boss named Jared who wants to help them do this. The only way to get to South Figaro from Nikie is the boat, but when you try to get on the boat, you are told it is owned by the Crimson Robbers, and you're not a Crimson Robber, so you're not allowed. No girls allowed. You also learn that Figaro Castle has been stuck under the desert. It hit a rock or something.
Yeah, I love that detail. Like, you didn't need to put that in there, but we've talked before about all the little details in Final Fantasy VI that don't need to be there, but they just make it feel richer. All these little lines of dialogue about what's going on in Doma and prepping you for all these things. It just makes the world feel full and lived in and real.
Absolutely. That is one of the reasons I love this game. And then wandering back through the market, you see a very familiar-looking guy, but his palette's been swapped, so we're not quite sure it's him. Celes immediately recognizes him and said, "Hey, you're Edgar." He says, "No, I'm not Edgar. I've never even heard that name. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Come on, you're Edgar." And he said, he has this line that I think is, this exchange I feel is very silly, but I like it. He says, "Enough of this nonsense. I have things to do. I've been Jared all my life, my lady." And Celes says, "Only Edgar would say my lady."
Yeah. Like, wait, what?
Like, hang on. Maybe only noble folks talk like that. Maybe only noble folks from the north talk like that.
Yeah.
But Edgar says, "Actually, the words 'my lady' are used all over the world." Either way, we're fairly certain that just because he's wearing different clothes doesn't mean this is not Edgar. Also, Jared is clearly an anagram of Edgar.
Right. Right.
So
we
not
sneak
meant
on
board
to
the
be
ship.
fooled by this.
No, we are not. We sneak on board. We stow away to South Figaro. A couple of things you can learn in South Figaro is that Duncan's wife, if you'll recall, lives in South Figaro, and Duncan, Sabin's old martial arts master, she says, is alive and well, and he's just meditating north of Narsh, which kind of sounds like the thing you would say as a kid when one of your hero characters die. Oh, he wasn't killed, he was just knocked out.
Yeah, right.
Except in this case, it turns out to be true, and we'll jump ahead just a little bit because it's a very small story point, but once you've got the airship, you can fly up there and meet with Master Duncan so that Sabin can learn his last...
Right.
What is it? The bum rush or the phantom rush or something like that?
Yeah.
So he learns his last blitz move, and it's a really powerful blitz move, and there's this whole training montage, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Classic kung fu trope stuff.
Right. But for right now, Jared is in the inn, and you can follow him and the thieves to the Cave of Figaro. And in the Cave of Figaro, you are immediately met by Siegfried, which is cool, I guess. This guy we've had to fight occasionally who steals treasures that we want to steal. And he says, "Hang on, guys. It's pretty dangerous in there. I'll go in first and clear out the monsters. You wait here." But he never comes back.
Yeah. And he doesn't clear out the monsters. You go through and you're attacked by monsters. It's such a weird, like, what?
Yeah.
Again.
I think he was just trying to, stop the competition.
Yeah, sure. But these fun little details. Would Final Fantasy VI be worse in any substantial way without Siegfried? No. But it's funny when it happens.
Yeah, he doesn't matter. He's not a character who matters, but he's this figure who exists in this world, and he's kind of a big deal. We know his name, we know his sprite. Right. We recognize him when we see him.
Right.
So eventually you get to the spot where there used to be a recovery spring, and they lure a turtle over to hop on its back to get into this part of the cave you can never get to before. And then Siegfried follows after, and then we follow after Siegfried. And there are these various chests that have already been opened and looted, presumably by Siegfried. And you can encounter him at one point, but he runs away. Eventually, in following the thieves, you end up in the prisons of Figaro Castle. There are people collapsed in the prisons here. I don't know if they were meant to have been attacked by the thieves, or maybe they're running out of air. But Jared, who clearly is not King Edgar, is helping one of the Figaran guards. I don't know if he's maybe given him a potion or something. But we follow Jared up the stairs and then down into the engine room. The guy who usually blocked the engine room is also collapsed, and he does not stop us. And the engine room is filled with, I don't know what. I think they're called tentacles in the fight, but they're like snakes or vines, or it's not Ultros. It's not.
No, it's a weird tentacled monster thing, or several weird little tentacled monster thingies. I think it's open to interpretation. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Maybe it was another monster released in the breaking of the world. And the thieves say, "Boss, what are we going to do? Our treasures are in that room back there." And Edgar says, "You go in there. I'll keep this thing busy." So even criminals in his country, who he presumably put through a just and fair criminal justice system, he's protecting them still.
Right. Because they're people. They're not, yeah.
Right. Once the thieves are out of the room, Edgar drops the act and says, "What are you guys waiting for?"
Yeah. Come on, Celes, let's go. Dude. She's pretty miffed at him, I will say, because the whole time she's like, "I know who you are," and he doesn't give it up until this moment randomly, and she doesn't have too much time to give him gruff about it because they got to fight the monster.
Right. So they defeat the monster, and it's fine. And I can't remember if it's Celes or Sabin who says, "What was with the farce?" And he explains, "Well, I was wandering around. I heard what happened to Figaro. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how to get in. Fortunately, I recognized these idiots, and they were, they knew a way in. If they had gotten out, obviously they knew a way in. So I was able to convince them by pretending I wasn't the king." And then, the thieves are coming out, so they hide from the thieves. They don't rearrest the thieves or anything. The thieves get out with their treasure, and that's pretty much it. Edgar is able, with the monster dead, the engines work, and they're able to raise the castle once again.
It's interesting, too, like you said, I think they even question him real quickly, and he says, "Oh, they've never done any crimes of any real value. Like, yeah, I'm going to let them take the treasure because that's what they get for breaking me back in. Fair play,
What were they doing in jail then?
Well, presumably they'd, had maybe even served their time, but were stuck in there in the world of ruin or whatever. Yeah, I know. It's sort of a weird direction when he says, they never really did anything all that bad anyway. But I suppose in desperate times, the line moves a little bit, how much you care about people who've stolen things versus people who may be out there doing stuff that's much worse.
Kafka. So with Figaro Castle up and running again, we can travel between this desert and the desert on the other side of that little sea, where we can get to the town of Kolingen. This is the town where Rachel is still in suspended animation. You can go up there and talk to the kooky old man, and he'll talk about, well, Locke, he must be searching the world over for that treasure. Which treasure? Well, tough to say. You can get some clues that Cyan's been through. Some noble knight who uses thou was through the other day.
Right.
The man whose brother wanted to build a Colosseum has built a Colosseum, and there's some mean guy up there looking for a weapon called the Striker. There's a Narsh guard here who says that the town is filled with monsters and I have nowhere to go now. But Tritok is still up there, and maybe you could wake it up.
Yeah.
So that's a nice parallel to those other things we've already talked about. And finally, in the bar, we find a pale man in a long, dark jacket at the bar. I get the impression he's drunk and perhaps has been drunk for the past year or so.
Yeah.
Doesn't really say that, but that's the impression I get. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I exactly right. I get the sense that this is a person who's had a really rough time for a while now.
Yeah. He's kind of like Tara in a way. He's like, I'm just a gambler. I don't have it in me to do this anymore. I've lost my wings. I've lost my friends. On the other hand, he's got some friends here. And Celes gives them the line, you want to live in the world as it is? If not, then let's do something about it.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps easier to say to a guy who's not taking care of 20-some orphans.
Right, and yeah, he's found his own way, presumably, again, in our retelling, into a bottle or substances of some kind. He's not living healthy. He's not dealing with this trauma by taking care of children.
Right.
He's destroying himself because he has lost hope.
But presumably he's supporting the economy of Kolingen, so there's that.
Right, and that's the thing about our Final Fantasy heroes. Even when they lose hope, they do it in surface ways, but there's that part of them that is just waiting for Celes to walk into the bar, slap you in the face, say, look,
right,
it's time to go. I know how you're feeling, trust me. I know how you feel.
Yeah, she knows. Yes. And you might be asking, why did he choose to hole up in the town of Kolingen? Well, nearby, in fact, not a far walk from the town, is a tomb. In fact, it's a very big tomb, and I kind of wonder why it is the way it is. It's left unsaid.
I noted its elaborateness as well. And
yeah.
I gave that some thought. And we know that Setzer is rich by this world's standards. And presumably, because she had the funds to build her own airship, we're getting into this, so was Daryl. And so Daryl's tomb, where he says we must go, is exceptionally elaborate. And as I was watching the walkthrough and research for this, I was thinking about like Egyptian pyramids and the way rich people would build their belongings into these big tombs. And that's really what this is, down to some of the most important belongings or items or whatever you might call them in this world. And so I guess it would make sense that they would be locked away behind long tunnels of water and gateways, and there's a bunch of turtle monsters. Like, it's extraordinarily elaborate.
Right. Yeah, I think there are various explanations you could come up with. I kind of wondered if maybe this tomb existed before and they had explored it together, but that seems more like a Rachel and Locke thing.
Yeah,
but yeah, so
there's a lot of mystery surrounding this, which is also good.
Right. Yeah, so they go out to Daryl's tomb. Setzer leads them down here. I like this. Celes says, so this woman was your friend? And he says, yeah, nothing scared her. And I love that. Like, he's scared, but she never was.
Yeah. Again, there's a little line that I might change. I don't know if it's tonally because it's such a like an Americanism that I'm not sure people of this time or world would talk this way. On the other hand, when he calls Daryl a piece of work,
yeah,
I felt like I knew her. I felt like it drove to it. And I don't like cliches like that to describe people, but you knew he meant it in such a loving way, but also what very little we hear about her paints a pretty vivid picture. So again, well done to the writing team and translators.
There is one thing I want to mention in all the puzzles and such is you have to inscribe on a tombstone. You have to find 4 tombstones to find the phrase backward, to inscribe it on another tombstone to get a thing. And the phrase is, the world is square.
Which is fantastic.
Which is wonderful because that's the catchphrase of Squaresoft at the time. But also, when you look at the world map, it's literally square.
It looks square. It's funny and ironic, too, because this is the first Final Fantasy game where we get more of a sense of the roundness of it with some of the camera angles that we get. But yeah, when you look at the map, it's square. And it's also a callback to the first game in the franchise, when the only way to have the open world map, which is square, revealed is to do a backwards magic thing. It's press B select.
Yeah. So when you make your way through the dungeon, there's this big long stairwell and there's some flashbacks. Setzer talks about this bringing back a lot of memories. Then we get from Daryl's point of view. She says this experimental airship is probably a bit unstable, which makes me wonder so a few years ago, were there more airships? Were they building them all the time?
Oh,
Was it just the
interesting.
two of them?
I always had the opposite interpretation, that it was just the two of them, that they were on the cutting edge, that they were the first two to build and pilot airships, and that maybe that's part of the reason why some stuff went wrong here. But yeah, I don't know. I had always gotten the sense that they were, at the very least, among the first.
Well, if it's an experimental airship, that would suggest that there are airships that aren't experimental. There are airships that
Correct. Right.
are just regular run-of-the-mill airships. So maybe some of that technology has come out of the Empire, presumably spurred on by Sid. Does that mean that Setzer and Daryl are also engineers and are creating their own airships? I assume that Daryl designed and engineered this airship on her own, or maybe with Setzer's input.
Right. And actually, there's another line. She makes a reference to trying to break all of the speed records. Who's setting speed records? So you're right. There must have been. We could do a whole story on the age of airships and what happened to them. Why did they all go away?
Right.
Kind of like the dragons in Game of Thrones. Why aren't there any anymore?
And maybe it's proprietary technology. Maybe it's controlled by the Empire, and that's why that's why they got Setzer under their thumb, right?
Right.
They decided to ply him with whatever vices he prefers, because he's got the only other airship outside their own.
Right. And that's probably why they went and buried this one, or he went and, as we're about to find out, he went and buried the Falcon deep underneath this tomb. Now
I've got a conspiracy theory. We don't actually know what happened to Daryl. We get this flashback here now. He asked, what are you trying to prove? And she has this line, if something should happen to me, the Falcon is yours. Now, is that because it's experimental, or is it because the Empire's on her trail?
Oh, man.
And he's like, no, I'm going to win this from you in a race, Han Solo style.
Yeah.
And then she has that line about breaking every record, and be the woman who touched the stars. And then he says, I'll be waiting for you on our hill.
I love that he gives up in the race. She scorches him.
And she smokes him.
And he just goes, I'm headed home, sweetie, when you're done being the most badass woman in the world. I'll be waiting for you at our spot.
But we don't actually know what happened to her. We don't see her go down.
We just see him staring out across the mountains waiting for her.
Yeah. I wonder if the Empire had something to do with it.
Yeah.
If Setzer's standing on that hill with that beautiful sunset, waiting for the love of his life, who he both adores and hates, because she's better than him in every way.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody sabotaged her airship.
Oh, man, I hate the Empire more than I ever have right now in this moment. Oh, that's so good.
He explains that the wreck of the Falcon was found a year later. He restored the craft. He hid it in the tomb. And Edgar has a line. He says, this is the Falcon, which suggests that Edgar, as an engineer, has heard of the Falcon.
Right. It's which is obviously, by the way, a reference to the Millennium Falcon from
I should think so.
Star Wars. Yeah. And it reminds me of a meta outside of that story that Kevin Smith told on his podcast about the time he got to go and visit the set of one of the new Star Wars movies and got to go and stand inside the Millennium Falcon. You almost get the sense of Edgar being like a fanboy all of a sudden. The king of an entire realm, but he is beside himself in the presence of this magnificence.
Right. I think he's impressed with Setzer because Setzer restored the craft. Right. Setzer's also got to be at least as brilliant an engineer as Sid and Edgar.
Right.
I would think, yeah.
And maybe the tomb?
Maybe he built the tomb and all the traps. I don't know. Because he knew the Empire was coming for the ship.
Right.
But he didn't want to fly it.
Right.
Maybe. So, at this point, we get a very cool music cue. The new airship music. Whereas the overworld music in this world is very oppressive, like the 1999 music. No, the future music in Chrono Trigger. It's just sort of ethereal and clinking. The overworld music for the World of Ruin feels that way to me also, but the flying music feels like maybe we can do this. And it emerges from the ocean like the great whale of Final Fantasy IV. And it's worth noting that you only need 3 characters in order to get to the end of the game. You need Celes, you need Edgar to get you to Kolingen, and you need Setzer to get the airship. And then you can use those 3 characters to get to Kefka. I don't recommend it. I imagine that's something that people who want to challenge themselves do sometimes.
Sure.
But you miss out on a lot.
Right. And there's even a big prompt here, as rightfully is the case. It's the theme of the game, again, is found family. Now we literally have to go and find our family. As you mentioned, the piece of music. I'll talk more in the music episode about my history of airship themes. Not a big fan, honestly. Uematsu's a genius with everything, but I'm not a huge fan of most of the airship themes. I love this one. It's called Searching for Friends, and that's rightfully so, because that's what Setzer says at this point. Like, hey, look, it's time to go find our friends. But I also love, too, this, I don't know if you call it from a gameplay or storytelling. One of the best things about a Final Fantasy game is getting to meet all of the characters who are going to play a big role in the story, whether they become a member of your party or not. And there are so many to meet in this game. It's the biggest cast of characters in any of the Final Fantasy games, still. Unless you count things like tactics or whatever, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
And not only do you, I talked about, first you get to hear about most of the characters before you meet them. You get rumors about them, or you see them in flashbacks, or you hear of them. Then you get to meet all the characters. Then they get to come together as a team. They really start to form a family. Then they're shattered, and you get to meet them all again and go and see what everyone's up to. You get that sort of cathartic feeling of getting a new party member all over again with each one of the main cast of characters. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's one of the most beloved casts in the series, because you get all this extra stuff. Really, now it's just about finding out more about these people, and the mechanism of what would you do in the end of the world really helps us get to know who these people are, and maybe a little bit better about who we are.
So you might be asking yourself, in a world of ruin, with only 4 of our 12 family members together, how are we even going to begin to search for the rest? Well, at least in the moment, Celes